Dalton, Riley, Wolves and Wagers. I'm gonna start off tonight, Rye. I'm gonna give the Hawks a little bit of credit.
For sure.
Completely came out in the second half and just figured their stuff out.
Stuck with it.
But
They didn't roll over.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Trey. I know he doesn't play much defense, but I'm an offensive guy. He came out, made some big shots. Also missed some shots at the end there too. But obviously the story was, and it just kills me, dude, because you look at Rudy Gobert and what we gave up for Rudy Gobert, and then you look what the Hawks gave up to get a guy who absolutely took over this game and fits perfectly. No offense to Mike, but Mike Conley is just a step behind from his Grizzly days, even his Utah days. So imagine having Murray, Ant, Jaden, Nas, and then we're obviously going to get into Cat, but that's my big point that came out of this, was just imagining Murray, and then I think I'll let you jump in the Cat and the rest of kind of what you saw tonight, but that was my big thing.
Yeah, and we're both going to talk about Cat here, but I didn't even think of that, D, and that's a great point, because how many times, and we both like D'Lo, we really do, we still have love for D'Lo.
Yes. Yep.
How many times did we talk last year, and even a little bit before that, man, what if the Wolves just went, and their move was to go get DeJounte Murray instead?
Yep.
And case in point right here, couldn't miss tonight, right? Like, finished with 41 was the last I checked. And then he might even had a few more there at the end. I guess I wasn't really paying attention at that point. I was getting my car started so I could come back home and get ready for Wolves After Dark. But yeah, that's tough that he didn't miss much in the second half. They didn't either, but it's kind of a double-edged sword because neither did the Wolves in the first half, right? Like they could not miss. They shot 70-something% in the first half in total. Like, it was insane. But we got to start with Cat, right? We have to. We talked about doing a Wolves After Dark yesterday. We decided we're going to mainly save the series for right after games, which is probably what we're going to be doing going forward as well. But small sample size, 3 games this year. But him and the Rudy pairing wasn't great last year in the games he did play. But he just looks like he doesn't fit out there. And my biggest problem was, he played well in the first half. He had 13 first half points, pretty good efficiency, and he got But at the end there, what just grinded my gears is it seemed like he was forcing when they were down. And I get that you have to force at some points to get back into the game. But when Anthony Edwards isn't getting the ball and not getting those shots, and Cat's just out there forcing weird hook shots or mid ranges, and it's not a good look. And that, to me, really was a driving factor I wasn't happy with. A few other things I got on my bad section here before I let you go in on Cat. The only bad thing that Ant did tonight, the turnovers, right? 5 turnovers. A couple of them costly at the end of the game there too.
Bad.
When they were trying to get back into it. No other starter had a turnover. I thought that, and I'll touch on that later when I talk about what the Wolves did good. But the Ant turnovers that, he's got to clean that up. But overall, fantastic game for him. Mike, as you touched on, 2 for 9 from the floor. I think he's 2 of 6 from deep.
Yeah.
You need more from him. You do, because pretty much every one of his looks were wide open, right? Like, you got knock down shots.
Wide open.
So, and then he did have one of those layups, I think, that got swatted where he forced it. And I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Right? Like, he kicked that thing out. And then the last thing I have, or 2 other things here. Second half, Nas. Fantastic first half. I think he had 4 3-pointers in the first half, or maybe he finished.
Couldn't miss.
And the second half, I don't even know if he scored. I really don't. And I'm fine with him taking the wide open threes that he did, but he also didn't seem to be looking to kick it out either when he got the ball down low. It just, the flow, we talked about it over text during the game. The flow was not good in the second half, and they finished with 34 points in the second half. And that's what I have on my bad section here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that worries me is what happened in the second half when you have a pairing like Cat and Rudy, and then when Ant's maybe not knocking down the outside shots, things just get ugly, man. It's just not enjoyable to watch, even. I mean, you're getting outscored late in the fourth. What, 63-23, 40 points difference? I mean, and I think a lot of that does fall on Cat and Rudy when it comes down to it, because you just look at them and they're just all out of whack, and there's just no consistency between those two. Give me one time they both were just playing absolutely unbelievable. Probably the first half.
Yep.
So it's just so frustrating just to see a great start to a game and then completely throw it away. And now you look at 2 L's that should be dubs, and you should be 3-0 with Jimmy being out for Miami. So it hurts. 1-2, man, in the West is just not good. You look at Memphis too. I mean, 2 teams that just are off to slow starts.
Yeah, and it's a tough look ahead, in which at the end of the video, I'm sure we'll touch on the preview to Denver more, but it doesn't get any easier. You're hosting the defending champs on Wednesday. And that's almost a must win, in my opinion. You got to get the ship righted at one point. Like you said, this is the West. Like, there's no room for error. And when you drop 2 games that you should absolutely have won, it's brutal. It hurts. If I was Chris Finch, I would not let them be talking on the plane home. I'd say, hey, you're going to watch this second half film and you're going to analyze everything that you think. And I want everybody to come to the meetings tomorrow with something to take away, and everybody speak up and say what's something that they wish they would have done better or could have done better, right? Like, there's got to be some accountability. You can't look at this. The worst thing they can do is say, hey, it's a long season and it was a tough loss, but we're going to bounce back. You can't look at it that way. I mean, I get trying to have the positive outlook, but this is an immature team, right? Like a lot of these issues have been present for years now with this competitive, style Wolves basketball, that since they, made the playoffs and are expecting to be in the playoffs every single year. They got to clean this up. In my opinion, and maybe it's recency bias, to me, it's almost worse than that Game 3 loss against Memphis. It's just, I don't know. It makes me want to pull my hair out watching some of the things they do.
Yeah, and on top of it, one thing that does excite me and one positive, obviously, is in the first half. You look at our starting 5, one of the best in the league when they're cooking. I mean, McDaniels started 4 for 4 tonight. It looked like he didn't even skip a beat. Cat was actually posting up. Sadiq Bey, Rudy was, I think, up to 9 rebounds in the first half. Nice prop bet by you again on the Rudy side of things. Obviously, Ant was getting after 20 first half points. Even Mike, I think, knocked down 2
early
shots
3
in the first half. I don't think he made a shot in the second half.
No,
so
he finished 2 and 9.
They were just playing. I mean, even Atlanta, I was surprised how close they kept it in the first half, because Minnesota just couldn't miss, because Naz Reid, you add him next to that starting 5 and how good they played, you're not going to beat this team. But then you just completely do the exact opposite in the second half. But that's one positive. When this starting 5 clicks, I don't know if there's a lot of teams that can beat them.
No, and you bring up a good point, because it wasn't like the Hawks played bad in the first half, right? We just shot the lights out. They finished with 60 first half points. That's a good half.
For sure.
I mean, 60 points is a good half of basketball in the NBA. And so credit to them for sticking around. I mean, they got hot. They went on their run when they couldn't miss, and the Wolves didn't respond to adversity like the Hawks did. The Hawks took a few punches and they stayed with it. The Wolves seemed like they kind of keeled over. I want to touch on a few key moments here before I get to what I liked from the Wolves. 6-ish minutes to go, give or take. I should have pinpointed the exact mark, but they were down by less than 10, right? It was when the Hawks had already went on their run, and they were still possible to get back into the game. And there was 2 straight possessions where Ant doesn't touch the basketball, right? One of them ended in a Mike Conley 3-pointer, and the other one I think ended in a Cat miss, like a forced miss shot. You can't go 2 possessions without Anthony Edwards touching the basketball, especially the way he played tonight.
In front of the home crowd.
Yeah, in Georgia.
You look at what he did last time. He maybe didn't have the best start to the game, but he absolutely took over in the fourth quarter and sent Atlanta packing.
Mhm.
And that's what I was hoping that he was going to do in the second half tonight. I thought we could maybe see a 40, 45-point game from Anthony Edwards here in Atlanta, and then he might not even play much of the
Right.
fourth quarter. But boy, oh boy, man, I want to hear some of your positives though, because kind of my main one was that starting five unit and Nas just plugging right in. I think he hit 4 first half threes. Him and Ant, I think, had like 8 or 9 threes in the first half, which, it was fun to watch, Riley. The first half was so fun, but
It
let me hear
was.
some of your positives.
And I'll start there. Perimeter shooting and shooting in general, right? 49% from the floor, 48.5% from deep. Fantastic, right? Got to give credit there because the shooting woes in the first 2 games were present, right? So happy to see that that's turning around, and that just kind of shows you that they weren't stopping Atlanta. But then next up, I have finishing possessions. And now maybe this is just because the Hawks couldn't miss in the second half. 4 offensive rebounds the entire game for them with Clint Capella, right? Like, that's impressive to keep them off the glass and only allow them to have 4 offensive or second chance opportunities. Very impressed with that. Jaden, you had mentioned him earlier. You're right. It looked like he didn't miss a beat. I'm wondering if he was on a bit of a minutes restriction. He only played like 24 minutes and he was 5 of 6 from the floor. So he had to have been on that. Maybe Finch didn't even want to play him 24. He probably only wanted to play him 20. But so I'm guessing he was on a minutes restriction. And then, as I touched on earlier, 10 turnovers overall, none by the starters besides Ant.
Yeah, I mean, still really excited about this team. Don't get me wrong, Ryan. And I'm not going to start, talking cat trade rumors necessarily yet, but I do want to put it on people's radar, because we can't trade Rudy. All right. We just can't do it. And he's actually been pretty good this year. But you're just not really going to get anything for him,
Yeah. And that would be admitting that you lost the trade. And like you said, he's been good.
Yeah. He's been pretty solid outside of, some of those close point blank shots. I mean, I was listening to Dominique. He's on the Atlanta side of things, and he was talking about Rudy. He goes, just sucks the air out of a team when you have a beautiful alley-oop and Rudy goes up to get it, and then he misses a bunny. Dominique Wilkins is talking about Rudy, and it's so refreshing to hear it from an outside perspective, so that I don't feel bad for constantly being frustrated when he does that, because he does a lot of good things.
He does, for sure.
But you got to do the simple things to keep the flow going in the game. And in the second half, Rudy was back to the stuff that we've seen way too often.
Just not really a factor in that second half.
Yeah, but Karl-Anthony Towns, great first half. I didn't have any complaints. He was actually dishing the rock. He had that beautiful pass across to Mike for that early 3. And I was like, well, Mike's going to easily cash that 11 and a half points tonight. He's going to come out and have 4 threes, but the cat stuff that I just get frustrated with is there's times when you can easily replace him with subpar players in your lineup. And if you want to be considered one of the best, you cannot have that be consistently said. Now, there can be times, like look at Dame. He had one of his worst performances, but I can guarantee you that that's not going to be consistent. Cat just consistently has these games where I would rather have PJ Tucker out there than Karl-Anthony Towns.
I see what you're saying. And I texted you tonight with probably 8 minutes to go, 7 minutes to go maybe, and I'd say I'd bench him. Like at that point in the game, because the game was still within reach, he wasn't doing a lot of things right at that point. I would have benched him. Now, Kyle Anderson did play a lot there in the fourth. I would have liked to see him pretty much surrounded by Ant, Rudy at the 5, because Rudy didn't play like the last 5 minutes of the game. I would have had Rudy at the 5, Kyle at the 4, Jaden at the 3, and then Ant, and then maybe Mike, I guess. Like that probably would have been the closing lineup.
Or Shake. I had
Shake
that little
nice.
stretch.
And
even, you go ahead. I'll let you go first.
First half, amazing for Shake. And this is not on him by any means at all. I do wish he took 2 semi-contested shots in the fourth there. It's like we could probably have gotten a better look than that. But overall, very good to see that Shake's starting to fit in, because I think he is going to be a critical point of this team. And I think Finch loves a guy like his skill set, right? Being able to create his own shot. I don't think the Wolves have had that, especially off their bench, in a long time.
Yeah, and I think what really surprised me is Shake Milton. He can go get you a bucket. The Hawks, he was talking about game 3 when he went and I think got like 20 in that playoff game for the Sixers. So, I mean, did he have 10 points there in the first half?
Yep, 10 first half points. And Naz, they both had 10 off the bench.
Yeah, so if you can get that type of production with the starting 5 unit chugging along how they were, and now the McDaniels minutes restriction was probably had something to do with that because he really started things off in this game. And then he came in and knocked down that shot. And I was hoping he was going to play a little bit more, but I get it. It's early in the season coming off that injury. But I think things would have been differently. And like we mentioned in game 1, I think if he plays that game, we could be talking about the Wolves being 3-0 coming into a matchup with Denver, which, gosh, that would be a nice nationally televised game, but not anymore, bud. Not anymore.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I like how you bring up Jaden and how they miss him, because even on a night when DeJounte could have threw, I don't know what the expression is, but to him, it probably felt like he was throwing a beach ball in an ocean, right? Like he just could not miss. But if Jaden plays 35 minutes compared to 24, DeJounte and Trey probably have 10 less points or so, and Jaden probably gives you a few more points, and that's the difference in the game again. So
bingo.
It's just, I'm happy he's back, and I totally get it. Like you mentioned, it's early. You're not going to want him to go out there and restrain it, his calf, because we saw Cat miss 4 months with a bad calf strain.
Almost 50 games, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I totally get it, but I'm just happy he's back, and there's a lot of good to take from this game, but this one stings. It really does.
Yeah, especially in one thing with Ant that I'm just going to touch on quickly, and it's not, hating on Ant or anything like that, but one thing I am a little bit worried about is playing FIBA, playing a lot in the preseason. In the second half, you kind of didn't really hear much of Ant, and I think he's got to be able to go and just get the rock sometimes too and be like, hey, get out of the way. I'm going ISO here, especially when, you're shooting lights out. I mean, there was, how fun was that to watch, Riley?
Oh my God, that first quarter. I couldn't. I
couldn't even contain myself because you were a little bit behind me.
Yep,
and I literally just wanted to keep texting you, dude, because I had just a smile on my face the whole first half. And a lot of that was due to Anthony Edwards just doing what he does. And even Dominique said when he plays like this, he's one of the best players in the league. Rated 13th in ESPN ahead of Dame. Everybody was kind of hating on that. But we watched a lot of Anthony Edwards, and we saw what he's capable. Oh yeah. But in the second half, I'm hoping that fatigue isn't an issue.
Right. It was
with Ant
for sure.
But I just want to just mention that just slightly. But outside of that, Ant 30-point prop finally cashed at plus 190. But I really did think that he was going to go for easily a 40 piece tonight, right?
Yeah, I wish he did for my sake. I had him at plus 35. That would have been a really nice cash. Would have got a lot of those units back, but and he finished I think he was 4-12 in the second half. He was 8-9 in the first half, and he was 4-12 in the second half. He's got to make his bunnies. That's been one of his bugaboos since he's came into the league. There's a lot of times where it's like, man, you just got to finish that. Like, I get it's not a wide open layup, but those are shots that all NBA players make. There. And there was a few of them again tonight, but this is far from on him. I love what he was doing in the first half, even when he was cooking, right? Like 8-9, the old Ant. And for our sake, for viewers' sake, it's fun to watch him take some bad shots. Let's call them bad shots, right? But it's just electric when they go in. But he was moving the ball so well and making pretty much every right read, every right play. He finished with, I think, 7 assists, right? I think he had 31, 7, 6. Like, that's a good day in the office.
Oh, absolutely, for the stat book. But yeah, that third quarter, DeJounte Murray couldn't miss. 8 for 8. Got outscored by a ton of points.
He had more points than the Wolves did in that third quarter. I think DeJounte had 22 third quarter points. The Wolves had 19.
And that does not surprise me. If you watched the third quarter, tonight, it was clear that the third quarter was the problem.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that's not a coaching problem, because I will say there was a time there where I was hoping Finch would call a timeout when you're watching the game, and yes, you might have a 12-point lead, but when you're watching a couple possessions of just no offensive flow, sometimes as a head coach, you just got to call a timeout and just sit them down and say, let's go to Ant here. Ant, go get us something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that the slow start to the second half is not a coaching thing, okay? And that might be a little bit, but just throwing that out there as well for Finchy.
Yeah, and that's why Quinn Snyder, who I think we both can agree, great coach, right?
Yep.
And what did they do? That when they were up by, I don't know what, I think they're up 12 or 14 or so, and then the Ant had 2 consecutive buckets to get the Wolves, back in striking distance, instant timeout, right? Like there was a stoppage of play, not much before that, where they were on commercial break, and he saw the Hawks go empty, or Ant score a bucket, Hawks go empty possession, Ant gets another bucket, calls timeout, right? Cools off Ant a bit, cools off the momentum. That's just beautiful coaching, right? That's just
beautiful.
And there was a play there, I think early in the fourth, where it was like 2 minutes in, and I know you don't want to use a timeout there, but to me, it's like, Finch, you got 4 timeouts, and this is starting to get out of hand. Like, you got to use one. And he did call one, but I think it was about 2 possessions too late. But overall, I don't think this is on Finch necessarily. And I know that's not what you're saying, but it's just there's a lot to look at in this game, and it's just really disappointing that this team, who struggled greatly in the third quarters last year, I mean, that's been known. That was one of their worst things that they could do last year. They just would come out so flat-footed, and it's right back to it, right? Like at some point, this team's just got to grow up, and I don't really know if they can, if Cat's going to be their second best player.
Yeah, and kind of the last thing that I'll touch on that I'm most excited about is who balled out tonight, and now Jaden was out, but who balled out for the most part last game. You're looking at a big three that is inked up for a long time in the future of your franchise. Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Naz Reid. Now, Naz struggled a little bit in the second half as well, but overall, to have those three as building blocks and to still have a piece like Karl-Anthony Towns, if we ever do start to really talk about those discussions, because that's my big point from tonight, is the coaching. Is that going to continue to be a problem? Is Cat going to continue to have the inconsistencies? I'm going to look to see if this continues to be a problem. But overall, Ant, the man. Jaden, fantastic. And Naz, you can plug him at the 4, the 5, come off the bench, start for you, and he can get you 25 and 10. So that's my last positive. So I'll let you finish out tonight's episode, Ryan, and kind of give a glimpse into the Nuggets. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, we're not going to necessarily start talking Cat trade packages yet, even though I think it's almost inevitable, just purely from, they're in the second tax apron. It's going to be tough to keep everybody paid, right? And it's going to be impossible to sign anybody else. Like Kyle is going to have to walk, because we don't have the money for him. So it's going to be unfortunate when these awesome role players have to go. We're not going to touch on that much now. We'll definitely save that for another episode that we'll deep dive into. But we'll do a quick preview to Denver here. It's at home, and to me, I mentioned earlier, I think it is almost a must-win, right? You can't drop to 1-3 on the season in this conference with winnable games. They got kind of a gauntlet here at the beginning of the season, and it doesn't lighten up pretty much until I think like February, something like that. When the Wolves released their schedule, I was looking at it and I was like, geez, these first like 30 games, they got it. They're going to be battling and scrapping. So it's almost a must win. You got to contain Jokic. I know you can't really contain him, but if you can keep him off the glass as far as like second chance points and make it tough on him, then, he's still going to be Jokic and get what he can, like, and take what you give him. He's just, that great. But, Ant 40 piece. I'm calling it. He's pissed off, right? They lost a bad game. Going to be at home. He's going to want to show out. And like we saw in that playoff series, Denver is not a good matchup for Anthony Edwards. And now they don't have Bruce Brown, right? Like arguably their best perimeter defender and matchup for Ant. It's not out there. And Jokic is not going to be stopping him at the rim. So I'm really looking forward to that game, to watching Ant go downhill. We need him to get to the line more. I think he only shot 1 free throw tonight. And I think it was off a defensive 3 seconds. It wasn't even like an and one or anything. So
Missed it.
he did miss it too, and that's why I was like, "Come on, Ant, lock in." I was clapping at the TV like I was actually having an influence on the game. But overall, a lot to take away from this game. I hope you guys, I'm guessing a lot of you viewers thought the same or had a lot of the same outlook as we did. But on to Denver, and you just gotta swallow it and move on, I think.